Welcome to the Power Exit Podcast. This show is dedicated to business owners who want to scale up, plan smarter, and prepare for the ultimate exit. We'll talk with M&A experts and owners who've been through the process to provide actionable advice so that you can sell your business on your terms and without regret. I'm John Marsh. Join me as we prepare to take control of your exit. All right, welcome to the Power Exit Podcast today, where we spend time talking to professionals to help business owners take control of the process of selling their business. I am lucky today to have a good friend and horrible golfer on the podcast with me, Mr. Steve Fisher. That's a bad intro, Steve. I won't say that. You are a good friend and a good golfer, and I'm glad that we've gotten to know each other over some rounds together. So, Steve, thanks for being here on the Power Exit Podcast. I'm thrilled to have you in my network, and I know you're doing some good work. So I'm excited about today's episode.
Thanks for inviting me, John. I appreciate being on.
Yeah, you were number 18 on the list, so I'm glad those 17 couldn't work out. So no, let's get into it. And all jokes aside, I am thrilled that you're here. I think you've got some great things to talk about. Remember, the point of this podcast is to help business owners prepare and to be ready to get their transaction done on their terms without regrets. So, Steve, you've worked as a CFO across a wide range of industries. Tell us a little bit about your background and what type of work you do now with Strategy Partners Group.
Sure. Well, thank you, John. Well, one interesting fact about my career arc is I don't actually come up through the accounting and finance ranks. My CFO journey began as an engineer.
Oh,
So I started out coming out of college into engineering, that typical route, but I gravitated towards the operations side of businesses. And eventually that led myself into financial services. And eventually that led me to working my way up through the operations of financial services firm, all the way up into managing the money, developing financial strategy, that sort of thing. And worked as a standard W-2 CFO for a couple of decades from that.
okay.
Not totally unusual, just as a quick aside. There's actually there's a noticeable minority of CFOs who actually do come up through the engineering ranks. It has something, I think, to do with the way we think and the way we approach things in a very logical and systematic way, which is really what you're paying a CFO to help you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So some of the things that we do as Strategy Partners is we provide, myself and my partners, we provide support in the areas of operational finance, strategy development, implementation, M&A, enterprise value creation, and growth. These are the types of things that we do, and we work in different types of industries. Myself, as I mentioned, I've worked in financial services, manufacturing, professional services, such as I've worked with dental practices and real estate developers and all these types of folks. So my partners also have a wide variety of backgrounds that they also bring to the table. So between myself and my partners and some of the other resources we can bring into a situation, we cover almost every industry that is out there.
Yeah. Wow. No. So it sounds like there's a lot of things that you guys do, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about those. You're more on the operational finance side. Is that correct?
Yes.
But when should a client think about bringing in you and your partners? What's an ideal time frame for you to get the business sell ready?
Well, there's a couple points to that question. One is, when do they bring in Strategy Partners Group? Typically, we enter a situation when there's some sort of enterprise-wide event occurring that really exceeds the existing bandwidth of the company, or maybe they have resources in-house to bring to bear, but they're better used actually doing their day job, if you will, generating a service or producing a particular product. So we come in as a supplemental role, and we're often brought in by a member of the C-suite or ownership. I've actually, while I do CFO type work, I'm actually been brought in by CFOs multiple times, just because they need somebody who has a similar skill set, but they have a full-time job to do themselves already. So that's where we come in.
Yeah, wonderful. And what's that timeline look like? Is it generally, so, for me, clients engage me when they're ready to go, when they're ready to sell the business. and I know it's not always just about selling the business for you and your partners, but if you can work back from an exit, saying the process takes 9 to 12 months, the process that I'm going to run, when should they bring you in?
Okay. Like you, I am probably brought in too late. So, so we all would love to work earlier. But there is one thing that I'd like all business owners to know is when you start thinking about when should I start thinking about um, selling transaction or an exit from a business, I tell business owners, and this is not a joke, that you begin planning the day you start the business.
Amen.
Um, that's the more work you do up front, the more procedures you put in place and policies you put in place that are with one part of them geared towards an exit, the easier the exit process becomes.
Yeah.
And this is something that I tell all business owners. So no matter what time you bring me in, there's probably more we could have done if you brought me in a little early.
Yeah.
But in general, well, you may like to get in at 9 to 12 months ahead of time. I prefer to get in about 18 to 24 months ahead of time.
Yeah.
Because there's things that I want to be able to do in performance. We want to show improved performance over repeat periods prior to a transaction. In fact, we want to show that type of track record prior to courting suitors. So you have to have all those quarters built up before you start even going to market.
Yeah. I had a call this morning with a client who said, "Oh, my business is going too well to sell." And he inferred that he was going to wait until there was a downturn. And that's not wise. We want to sell your business while there's plenty of gas left in the tank, but while you're demonstrating the growth that you're telling the market that you can achieve or they can achieve. I like your answer there, but it's also important during due diligence, as you know, when you're updating the TTM, the trailing 12 months, that you're showing the growth.
Correct.
And, it's okay if there's a down month. Businesses are cyclical. There's might be seasonality, but you darn well better be able to explain it. And a lot of folks can't, unless they have someone like you on the team. So you've talked about the businesses that you've worked with, and those that are thinking about selling. What's the biggest financial blind spot that you see that could hurt their chances of having a successful exit?
The biggest one is probably just a lack of any standardized or meaningful financials. Um, most Depending on the type of business, how sophisticated the business owner I'm working with is, they're working off of a P&L of some sort, which may or may not be sufficient. Um, some of them can have heard of the term balance sheet, probably don't really look at it, and almost none of them have really looked at a statement of cash flow. And if you ask any of them to give you a projected, a look forward of what their cash flow forecast of going for the next year or 2 years or a 5-year cash flow forecast, you'll be really lucky to get somebody to hand you one of those.
Amen to that.
So that's just a big item. Um, and one other piece that comes up that is a big stumbling block that I try to get into owners' hands is an understanding that the more involved you as the owner are in the day-to-day success of your company, the less valuable your company is to anybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. hmm Yeah, there's that owner dependency risk that we talk about a lot. And you know, we'll go into the next question, although I don't want you to use the same answer because this is the answer. But what's the biggest difference between running a business to grow and running a business to sell?
Well, really, it's a question of, uh, when you are trying to sell a business, you need to do all the things that you do to grow a business. So you need to show, as I mentioned earlier, the hopefully improved performance period over period. But the real difference is, I think, when you go to selling a business, is who's the audience for that story.
Yeah.
When you're growing the business, the audience for the story is the shareholders, you, your family, if you're the owner, that type of thing. When you're going to sell the business, you have to understand that you're creating a true, interesting story for a potential buyer. So you always have to be focused on, what does my company and what does my performance look like to an outside entity who I don't even know yet.
Yeah. Yeah, that's spot on. You've hit on a couple things, and I just want to touch on 2 points. One, you mentioned you start planning day one. Regardless of what system you're running, whether it's EOS or one of the others or your own internal system, I say that you need to be asking yourself, am I growing or am I exiting every 90 days? And even if you're, the first 90 days into your business, what makes a business sellable? We can use something as simple as HVAC work. If it's all project based, all new construction, and no maintenance or services, you're not going to get the same premium that you would get from a business owner who said, from day one, I'm going to grow a maintenance revenue. I'm going to grow my maintenance revenue. It's not all going to be project based. We have a lot of clients who do new construction, and sometimes oftentimes new construction is slow. And that's a detriment, right? So we had a contractor, an electrical contractor we took to market, and they were almost all project based. And he was a young guy. And he said, you know what? I've realized in this process and through talking to you, John, that we need to focus on service. And we're going to do that. And kudos to him. He's going to go grow that. He's doing it. And we're going to go back to market, and we're going to get the attention of private equity and strategics instead of just the individuals who are looking to buy a job. Let's talk a little bit about, how owners separate true profitability from lifestyle related expenses, especially when it comes to ad backs and adjusted EBITDA. Do you see a lot of lifestyle discretionary items running through businesses?
Of course. Of course. I mean, I'm not I mean, and I tell owners that all the time. I say, "Don't hide it from me. It's there. I expect to see it." I'm almost surprised when I don't see it. Um, and and that's okay as long as they understand, hopefully with some guidance from me, the impact those expenses can have on their potential sell price. And then it can happen in a couple of ways. One is once you explain to them multiples of EBITDA in a potential valuation, and they understand that all of a sudden that $100,000 personal expense that they put on there, which they might be able to slip through to the buyer, is actually a $500,000 charge to their sell price because there's a lifetime multiple on that. That throws them. The second part is we before we present those financials to a prospective buyer, I believe it's incumbent upon us working on the sell side to identify those things and notify the potential buyer, hey, these are expenses that are in the financials you're looking at, which are not applicable post transaction. And these are adjustments that we would recommend that you make before you go find them. That's all about developing trust, right? The
Yeah.
buyer will hear that and say, okay, these guys seem like more trustworthy guys. They actually have some things together. They presented me a really nice financial package, hopefully. And the package is more than just the numbers. The package is the whole story of the enterprise, what's occurred. At the end of the day, um, I believe the way I talk about increasing value to a seller is the more turnkey you can make your future cash flows, the more valuable your company becomes to a prospective buyer. So that goes back to the situations you were talking about earlier with different types of revenue streams. Well, obviously, if you have recurring revenue, that's more turnkey than project-based revenue. That type of thing that makes an enterprise potentially more valuable. Again, we talked about ownership or key management, maybe not having to be as hands-on in the day-to-day operations of a company. That then makes it more
Yeah.
turnkey and then more valuable to a buyer. These are all types of things that I discuss with clients.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things I like to say, because business owners don't often realize how integral they are to the business. And the question I ask is, whose phone is ringing when a customer calls?
Well,
With a,
well, actually, I'm going to push you here a second. They do understand how valuable they are, and in fact, they wear it like a badge of honor. And this is
they
not a
do.
knock. This is not a knock. Understand this. The entrepreneurial mindset is, when they built this thing, was they rolled up their sleeves, they had the idea and the vision, they made it happen. And and at some point, they have to begin to delegate responsibilities away from them. Otherwise, their revenue is going to stall. Um, and their value of their business for potential sale will flatline or decrease.
Yeah. Yeah, we tell folks to check their ego at the door. If they're going to
Mhm.
get on these management calls and stand on top of the proverbial mountain and tell everybody how good they are, then how's the buyer get value from that? Hey, I'm so good at my business, but oh, by the way, I want you to give me tens of millions of dollars and let me go to the beach.
Mhm.
That doesn't work. So, um, you know, you're here talking about financial discipline, but you're also talking about owner dependency, which is important. So checking that ego at the door takes a lot of coaching. It takes a lot of, you know, making sure we're responding in the right way. Um, uh, how do you see business owners, the entrepreneurs, are they receptive to that feedback?
I think so. I mean, the reality is when an entrepreneur has engaged me, they've engaged me because they recognize there's something deficient on their end. There's some skill set or there's something they're missing that they're now able to,
Yeah,
they're not able to bring to the table that they think I can help them with. And
right.
they do, and all of my clients, no matter what they've engaged me for, um, didn't hire me to be a yes man.
Huh.
And they really want an objective opinion. And I, probably like you a lot of times, may be the first guy who officially tells them the baby's not that cute.
Mm,
And
mm.
that's not you can have that conversation in a constructive and productive way. And I do.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that we do is a opinion of value, showing what we think the business is worth. And we're not trying to get engagements from that. We're not trying to tell you, "Oh, your baby is beautiful," and then bring offers that are not so beautiful
Mm,
or not reflective of the beauty of the proverbial baby. But, that's a shock to a lot of folks when we show them a value that is not what they thought or what their buddy on the golf course sold their business for.
sure.
And it's an important part of the process.
And there's other things that go into the valuation too that you have to educate them on, John, that are maybe independent of the performance of their business. There's market factors that come in, but I mean, selling a business here in 2025 is different than was selling it in 2021 or 2022. Things are different. And,
Yeah.
there's things outside of your control that dictate the valuation of your company. Our goal is to identify all the things that are within the ownership's control and try to pull the levers that have the most impact.
Yeah. Time is on their side until it's not.
Right.
And there's no timing of the market. There's the time of I'm ready to exit or I'm not ready to exit. And what does life 2.0 look like for me? Another aspect is my business ready to sell? And if they haven't hired a group like yours or somebody like Steve Fisher, uh, they're likely not ready. So can you share an example of a business that dramatically improved its valuation or deal readiness with stronger financial discipline?
Oh yes, I worked with a dental practice a few years back. They had truly no no financials, no financial discipline. Never did a budget, I don't believe, or forecast anything. None of that stuff. So they were just literally uh, checkbook running their business off a checkbook on a weekly basis is
Yeah.
effectively what they were doing. Um, well, after working with them for a couple of years, got the business to a point where um, they were able to sell. They sold to as you probably are aware, dentist independent dentistry is a target for certain private capital providers, and sure enough, they got snapped up by one that operates in the southeast, um, and I helped them with that exit, and in fact, it's was a great success. Their concerns about keeping certain key employees were addressed. As far as I know, those key employees are still with the company. Um, I know the ownership received a payment that they thought was very fair, and they've moved on to the next chapter in their lives. Very successful.
Yeah, that's great. That's tremendous. Um, you've talked a little bit about the story and we talk about the story and we break it up into three parts. Kind of the story of what problem you solved when the business was created, where you are today, and what's the story, the growth story for the business that is down the road, even if you as an owner are not involved with that. You've hit on two things budgets and forecasts that do a good job of telling that story. Um, how many of your clients have a robust budgeting and forecasting system in place
All of my clients, John.
before they get to you, before they hire you?
Um, uh, what I would call a sufficient budgeting and forecasting process and procedure, I would say 20%.
Yeah. Yeah. And, a lot of clients want to develop a forecast for this process, meaning for the sale. And if they don't have a history of putting a forecast out and tracking their success against that forecast, it's really not worth anything. The other part of it is I don't want them to put a forecast out there that shows their business is going to double after the sale. A
Right.
couple things can happen. One, the buyer's going to say, "Well, why the hell haven't you done that before?"
Mhm.
Or or they're going to structure an earnout based on that unrealistic number. And we don't want to do that if the forecasting and budgeting process is not dotted with I's and crossed their T's. So,
I I I I agree with that, and I relay that as well to clients. But one other subtle thing differences I stress them at. Look, any potential buyer is going to try to put together some sort of forecast on your
yeah,
business. So, by you providing them a reasonable, fair forecast of yourself, you will help influence what their internal forecast looks like because they're going to look at it and they're going to actually probably take yours into consideration to various levels. Some might even literally take your forecast and just edit it a bit.
yeah,
Um, some will actually do a full blown forecast of their own, but consult yours as they're developing that. So you can influence. What I'm saying is you can influence the way their forecast of your business appear.
yeah, 100%. And it also shows that you can articulate the growth levers in the business. And I think that's really important. Very few of my clients do it well, but I get really excited when there's someone like you on our team who has talked through that with the client, and they've been doing it for some time.
Mhm.
So, how do you collaborate with the deal team, M&A advisors, attorneys, CPAs when the client is preparing to sell, and what role does Strategy Partners Group play in keeping everyone aligned?
Well, I look at three phases in the deal. There's the pre-transaction, there's the transaction, there's the post-transaction time frame. And I don't, I get involved in I can get involved hopefully before the transaction, helping prep the company for a significant period of time prior to exit, doing some of the things we've discussed already, putting some of those disciplines in place, uh, helping helping communicate with potential suitors, freeing up that frees up the existing management of the company to continue to do their day jobs I referred to earlier, while I can help respond to the multitude of questions from a potential buyer.
Mhm.
Um, the actual transaction piece, creating creating the purchase agreement and all of that. I don't do much with that. I provide input to it when asked for certain metrics, but that's not really my bailiwick. That's the job of the investment bankers and the lawyers and the M&A and the specific M&A advisors. I don't get involved in that, um, only in the periphery. And
Yeah.
then if I'm working, we're talking about working on the sell side, but when I do work on the buy side, I also work in the post acquisition integration. So I'm kind of on either end of the actual check being handed over.
Yeah.
Is kind of where I work.
Gotcha. So, we've talked about some of the things a client or an owner can do to get prepared for a successful exit. What's your take on sell side quality of earnings reports? And do you advise your clients to start one prior to going to market?
I I don't mind them, or nor do I mind preliminary valuations done, because all of both of these things are tools that can be used by a seller to gauge where the value of his business. What are the pitfalls that a buyer is going to see, and what are the stumbling blocks a potential buyer is going to see? Help me identify those now before I go to market, and give me a chance to correct them. That's kind of why I look at them. I mean, the reality is, I also would advise them. It's tough to say, hey, why you're going to do this preliminary valuation, for example, on my company, and I'm going to turn around and say, yeah, but you understand the buyer is going to do one too, regardless of what you did. But the point is, you're using it for two different things, right? You're using these tools and reports ahead of the acquisition, ahead of you going to market, as a means to identify identify internal weaknesses, right? They're using it to also identify your weaknesses. So let's try to clean those up according to see.
Yeah, yeah, and we're using it to set expectations with our clients. We're not going to provide any guidance to the market. Um, if we put the deal in front of the right buyers, they're going to know how to value the business, and we're never going to tell them what a number is because they might be willing to pay more.
Correct.
Um, so just one of those things that I think is important, that you don't provide pricing guidance to the market, but you are flexible. You do have an idea of what the business is worth,
Mhm.
well in advance of engaging someone like me.
Well, and the other thing is it also tells you not only what you think the business is worth, but it forces you to ask the question, or what for my business in my industry in my market sector, what are the drivers of business value?
Yeah.
And you'll have to brush up on some of that stuff, and that's good.
Yeah, 100%. Knowledge is power, and you've got
Mhm.
to go into this process with a lot of knowledge. So this is an unfair question, but I'm going to give it to you anyway because I know how you perform under pressure,
Yeah.
unless it's a 3-foot putt to beat me, which you don't do really well with.
Yeah.
But if a business owner is thinking about selling in the next 12, 24 months, what's the single most important thing that they should be doing right now?
Right now, pull down their financial statements, take a look at them. Make sure you have all three of the financial statements plus your forecast. Make sure you understand them. And if you don't truly understand them, find somebody who can help explain them to you. Um, also, uh, I would understand I would start thinking about, if you haven't already, what does the entity that is potentially going to buy my company look like? Is it private capital? Is it a competitor?
Yeah.
What is that? What does that entity look like? And what are they going to be looking for? And do my financials adequately promote to my benefit those things that they're going to be looking for? And if they don't, reformat things as needed, change descriptions on things as needed. I'm not saying mislead at all. It's got to be accurate, but you can reformat things in a way to tell a better, true story.
I like that. Yeah, and it frustrates me as an advisor when a business owner doesn't know about the dip they had 12 months ago.
Mhm.
When they don't have the handle on, hey, we had a customer pause for whatever reason. They came back and 60 days later. But if they can't articulate those things, or changes in margins, uh, those are important in general to run your business the right way, but especially when you're selling it, because the buyer is going to ask you every question under the book, or under the moon, and we need to understand what are the drivers of the business.
Right, because all of those, circling back to something I said earlier, all of those dips and dips that you're talking about, or hiccups in the past, all to a buyer reflect a hindrance to the turnkey ability of my future cash flow if I buy your enterprise.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There you go. Amen. So, Steve, I appreciate you being here on the Power Exit podcast today. Where can people connect with you or your team to learn more about what you're doing at Strategy Partners Group?
Well, you can go to our websites, strategypg.com. My email, sfisher@strategypg.com. But if you go out to the site, you'll see myself, you'll see my partners, you'll see other folks that we've affiliated with who we can bring to bear. Not only folks, but certain companies that have allied themselves with us that we
Yeah.
can bring to bear to a situation as needed. Um, and that's the and so that's kind of where I would recommend people start. Yeah, all my contact, all my other contact information you want to see is out there. And please reach out. Be happy to have conversation. As I always say, conversation doesn't cost anything.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you don't charge for that. But no, it's been a pleasure having you here today, Steve. I appreciate you. You're a good friend, and
Mhm.
you've dropped some knowledge bombs on us. So thank you for sharing your expertise with us.
All right, John. Thanks very much. Have a
All
great
right.
day.
You too.